So I went out and I rented a rototiller, which I thought was a thing about like so. Turned out to be 7 feet long. Big motor.
For years, America saw Michael Landon as the picture-perfect dad, loving, faithful, gentle. But behind that charming grin, a whole different story was unfolding. Nights when he disappeared without a word, secret deliveries showing up at his Malibu mansion, and mysterious photos that no one could explain. There were parties clouded with smoke, filled with faces not even the tabloids could recognize. After almost 40 years of silence, his son, Michael Landon Jr., finally broke it all open in an interview that left Hollywood frozen in shock. He spoke one chilling line that silenced the room. They praised my father for his kindness, but it was deceit that kept him alive his whole life. That one sentence cracked open the myth of America's favorite father figure, revealing a side of Michael Landon the world had never seen. The lights of television never touched that darkness, but his son was ready to pull the curtain back. Let's rewind the clock to the late 1970 seconds and early 1980 seconds, the golden years of Little House on the Prairie, when America adored him most, and when his true nature reportedly began to show. My father never loved my mother, because he never loved any woman at all, Michael Jr. said quietly in a sit-down with Vanity Fair in Los Angeles. His voice trembled but stayed firm. The entire studio fell silent. The dim yellow lights hit his face, a man in his 60s, eyes red and heavy, carrying decades of pain. It wasn't just confession, it was release. Hollywood had hidden this truth for years, locking it away behind Landon's wholesome image. He wasn't just a cheating husband, Michael said slowly, each word hanging in the air like smoke. He was a man who had to betray himself just to survive. He painted a haunting picture of Beverly Hills in the late 70 seconds, the Landon house, the so-called happiest home in America. Bright, yes, but never warm. Family photos filled the living room walls, each one slightly tilted, as if someone couldn't bear to fix them. That house was always cold, Michael recalled. Even when Mom made his favorite steak and mashed potatoes, he wouldn't sit with us. Then came his most painful memory, his 1980 birthday. The cake sat untouched, the candles burned down to wax, and still, no father at the door. I waited, he said softly. Mom tried to smile and said he was working, but I saw tears drop right into her wine glass. Near midnight, the door finally creaked open. Landon stepped in, reeking of an unfamiliar cologne. He gave a tired smile, patted his son on the shoulder, "Happy birthday, champ," and walked straight upstairs. No gift, no hug, no warmth at all. That night, Michael Jr. said, was when he realized the man America worshipped wasn't the same man who lived under that roof. The truth had been hiding in plain sight all along. Later, I realized he was never really there. His body showed up, but his heart was somewhere else while the world praised him as America's perfect dad. Michael Landon Jr. said with a heavy pause. On magazine covers, his father smiled like the man everyone adored. But behind those bright lights at NBC, whispers began spreading. Whispers about a special connection between Michael Landon and a young photographer named Eli Rosen. Eli wasn't just another crew member. He was his shadow, one former lighting technician confessed. They ate together, left together, always whispering. On the Little House on the Prairie set, everyone noticed, but no one dared to speak. Then came the scandal that changed everything. It was July 1979, during filming in Utah. Witnesses spotted Landon and Eli leaving their hotel early in the morning, both wearing matching bathrobes. A hotel cleaner later told a reporter, "They looked like two people who'd just woken up after a long night." That single image set off a quiet firestorm at NBC. Within days, executives called an emergency closed-door meeting. And right after that, Landon suddenly appeared with someone new, and one 8-year-old makeup artist named Cindy Clerico, suddenly always by his side. The timing was no coincidence. The very next day, Variety splashed a smiling photo of the two hand-in-hand outside La Scala restaurant with the headline, "Michael Landon's new love lights up Hollywood." The network framed it as a redemption story, but everyone behind the scenes knew what it really was, a carefully planned cover-up. The public believed it, Michael Jr. said bitterly. They wanted the fantasy more than the truth. He remembered watching his father pose and kiss Cindy for the cameras, like a man proving something, not a man in love. When Cindy became pregnant in late 1982, Michael Jr., then 19, dared to hope his father might finally change. He started coming home early, he recalled. Sometimes he even smiled. But Michael's mother, Lynn No, had already moved out. She'd chosen quiet dignity over public humiliation, protecting her children from the circus. The tabloids spun the story as a comeback. NBC called it the redemption of America's favorite dad. For a moment, it looked like the Landon legacy had survived the storm, but behind closed doors, things were still unraveling fast. One night in early 1983, Michael Jr. came home unexpectedly and overheard his father's voice in the dark. "Don't call again. We can't keep doing this." The tone was panicked, the words trembling. Michael never heard the other voice, but deep down, he knew it wasn't Cindy's. Weeks later, Landon and Cindy rushed into a Valentine's Day wedding on a white Malibu beach, all smiles for the cameras again. Only select NBC insiders and friendly journalists were invited. The Los Angeles Times headline glowed, "Michael Landon, love returns after the storm." America breathed a sigh of relief. But inside Michael Jr.'s private diary, scrawled in a teenager's shaky handwriting, there was just one heartbreaking line. He didn't marry for love. He married out of fear. Fear the truth would be seen. And that truth, Michael Jr. would later say, wasn't about simple betrayal or scandal. It was something far deeper, something Hollywood in the early 80s was never ready to face. "I don't blame him for who he was," Michael Landon Jr. said, his voice shaking. "I blame him for lying to all of us just to protect that perfect image." The words cut deep, and they came from a son who had seen it all. After the wedding, things only got worse. Landon became distant, moody, and turned to drinking more than ever. When Cindy showed up on set, his charm turned on instantly, that famous smile lighting up the room. But at home, silence. Long, painful silence. No family dinners, no Christmases, no birthdays, just an empty house where love used to live. One year, "I made him a Christmas card with my own hands," Michael said quietly. He left it unopened on the table and drove away. He remembered watching from the window, seeing the glow of the car lights fade, and realizing they had nothing left to say to each other. For NBC, though, the marriage was a dream come true. It kept the fairy tale alive, the perfect American dad reborn. The studio poured money into a new PR campaign for Highway to Heaven, painting Landon as a walking symbol of faith, family, and redemption. But behind those polished headlines, the whispers started again. A crew member told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner in 1985 he'd sit in the makeup room for hours just staring at himself. When Cindy called, he smiled, but his eyes were empty. That emptiness haunted him, and those who worked with him could feel it too. As Michael Jr. got older, he began to see things differently. "My father lived in a time when someone like him couldn't be himself," he admitted. "He chose to hide, to lie, and in the end it cost him everything, even us." Then, years later, came a heartbreaking discovery. After his mother Lynn passed away, Michael found a letter tucked neatly in her drawer. Her handwriting was delicate but firm. "You married that girl to protect your image, not your heart." He read it again and again and then smiled sadly. "She knew everything," he said softly, "but she never said a word. She kept his image alive. For us." Now, at 60, Michael Jr. doesn't speak with bitterness. His anger has faded into quiet reflection. Sometimes he rewatches Little House on the Prairie and studies his father's smile, that warm, glowing expression America fell in love with. "It's beautiful," he said, "but there's something sad in it, like he was pretending even then." He looked straight into the camera, eyes steady, voice calm but firm. "I'm not telling this to destroy him," he said. "I'm telling it so people understand, behind all the Hollywood perfection, There's often a human being quietly falling apart. Then he gave a faint smile and whispered, "He ran from himself his whole life, but in the end, the truth still caught up with him." But that wasn't the end, not even close, because what came next was darker, much darker, the secret that silenced Michael Jr. For over 40 years, the truth that would finally shatter the myth of America's ideal father. "That wasn't my father anymore," he said gravely. "It was someone else, someone living in the shadows, breathing through bottles and smoke, forgetting who he really was." Michael's voice grew hoarse as he stared out the window, his reflection blurring in the glass. "I used to think he was just lonely after the divorce," he said quietly. But no, he had stepped into a world I never dared to imagine. After leaving Lynn, Michael Landon traded the warmth of his Beverly Hills home, once full of laughter and family, for a new Malibu mansion. It was luxurious but empty, a cold palace overlooking the endless Pacific Ocean. At night, soft jazz drifted through the halls, mixing with the sounds of crashing waves and the faint smell of scotch, cigarettes, and something chemical that didn't belong. "He barely came home," Michael Jr. recalled. "And when he did, he walked past me like I was invisible." Landon had become a ghost of himself, smoking nearly 4 packs a day, drinking like it was routine. His office was always thick with haze, the light from the desk lamp cutting through clouds of smoke. Sometimes black bags would show up at the front door, Michael said. The delivery guys never said a word, just nodded and left. One night, curiosity got the better of him. "I opened one of the bags," Michael said, "and what I saw inside wasn't a movie script like he'd claimed." Later that night, he crept downstairs again, and what he saw burned into his memory forever. The lamplight glowed softly over his father's face. On the table sat a glass ashtray, a small glass tray filled with gray powder. Landon brushed it together with his fingers, brought it close, and inhaled sharply. His eyes flickered with a wild light, part thrill, part escape. Michael froze in the doorway. Landon looked up at him, expression calm, almost detached. "Adult stuff," he said coldly. "Never touch it." Then he turned away, leaving his son standing there, numb and silent. "That's when I knew I'd lost him," Michael said quietly. "The man who used to carry me on his shoulders was gone." After that, the strange deliveries became routine. Heavy metal cases appeared more often, always unmarked, always silent. The only sound was the soft ring of late-night phone calls echoing through the mansion. "Just deliver it to Studio City," Michael once overheard his father say. "No one must know." Soon, the Malibu house transformed into something unrecognizable, a secret refuge for people who lived in the shadows. Men in dark suits wearing sunglasses even at night. Women who looked like ghosts from nightclubs long closed. They never really smiled, Michael remembered. It didn't feel like a party, it felt like people hiding. Through the smoke, through the jazz, he caught fragments of whispered conversations about small film projects and quiet investments. Someone murmured they were part of Hollywood's underground circle, using film sets as fronts for dirty money. And Landon's famous name made it all look clean. Sometimes, Michael would sneak to the staircase and watch from the shadows. He'd see his father standing in the neon haze, laughing loudly, drink in hand, his arms around strangers. "Once," Michael said, "I saw him kiss someone through the smoke. I couldn't see the face clearly, but the hands weren't a woman's." He turned away, heart pounding, crushed under the weight of what he'd just witnessed. In the rare mornings when he was sober, Michael said, he'd stare at the ocean like he didn't even know who he was anymore. That was the moment his son realized the man America called the perfect father had become someone else entirely. When Michael visited his father during those later years, Landon looked like a shadow of the man the world once adored. He smiled faintly, Michael recalled, the room thick with alcohol and cigarette smoke. His father's voice was soft, almost distant. "Do you hear the waves, son? I hear them even when I close my eyes." It sounded poetic, but Michael could tell those weren't words of peace. They were words of a man trapped inside his own life. One night in 1986, Michael stopped by unannounced. The office door was slightly open. Inside, His father slumped in a chair surrounded by crumpled foil and glass tubes, the desk glittering with a thin, white residue. I shook him, Michael said, but he just whispered, "I'm fine, just need a little energy." His voice cracked, retelling it. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. From that point, Landon's decline was unstoppable. He couldn't sleep. He muttered to himself for hours. Sometimes, he accused the walls of spying on him. One night, Michael walked in to find his father burning old photos. Bonanza, little house on the prairie, whispering, "So they'll have nothing to use against me." The smoke curled up like a ghost of his past life. Rumors started swirling fast. The National Enquirer ran a story quoting neighbors. Unmarked cars pull up at midnight. Strangers in and out. NBC refused to comment, but insiders whispered that Landon was drowning under the pressure. He wasn't evil, one producer told TV Guide, just surrounded by the wrong kind of power. For Michael Jr., the worst pain wasn't his father's fall, it was being forgotten by him. Whenever I called, he said, he'd ask, "Which Michael?" His voice trembled, remembering it. I lost him so many times, not when he died, but during those long, lonely nights. By 1988, Landon's body was failing. His cough grew harsher. His face turned pale and hollow, yet he still drank, still smoked, still tried to act like the legend he once was. One morning, Michael found him sitting on the steps overlooking the ocean, a melted glass of whiskey beside him and an old photo of him and Cindy resting on his knee. His father turned to him and asked, "Do you think I ever loved anyone?" Michael couldn't answer. "Because I saw it in his eyes," he said. He didn't believe in love anymore. Those Malibu nights became symbols of a fading dream, neon lights flickering across the waves, smoke curling up from the balcony, and the rasping cough of a man the world still called a hero. "The world called him a hero," Michael said, voice cracking. "But I only remember a man sitting alone in smoke, beside stains that never faded." He paused for a long moment before adding, "They said he died from illness, but I know he'd been dying for years. Between the bottles, the smoke, and the nights no one dares talk about." And then came the night that changed everything, the night that would make Hollywood see Michael Landon like never before. "In his world," Michael Jr. said, "a smile was the command, and silence was the rule." His voice trembled as he remembered. "I once sat watching him film a scene. He was hugging a daughter on Little House on the Prairie, all warmth and love for the camera. But the moment they yelled, 'Cut!' he turned away and hurled a glass at the wall. At the NBC lot, people never knew which version of Landon they'd get each morning. Some days, he'd show up early, laughing, clapping shoulders, telling old Bonanza stories that had the whole crew rolling. A crew member told TV Guide in 1993. He'd joke with Melissa Gilbert, calling her my sunshine and promising horseback rides after rap. But it only took one drink, just one, for everything to change. The charm would vanish, the warmth would freeze, and the man everyone loved would disappear before their eyes. When he was happy, he was the best person in the world, the crew member said. But one sip, and he turned into someone else entirely. And that someone, as Michael Jr. would soon reveal, was not just unpredictable, he was dangerous in ways no one on set dared to speak about. Some mornings, Michael Landon walked onto set looking like he hadn't slept a minute, pale face, shirt half unbuttoned, and a drink still in his hand. The moment he appeared, the stage went dead silent. His rough voice echoed through the soundstage. "I want that light reflecting straight into that girl's eyes. Understood?" Then slam, he threw the script down so hard the pages scattered across the floor. Nobody said a word. From the cinematographer to the production assistants, everyone worked like they were walking on shattered glass. "We never knew when he'd explode," recalled veteran camera operator Tom Reynolds. "One minute he'd be cracking jokes, the next he'd smash a $25,000 camera because the lighting didn't match the mood." It wasn't just perfectionism, it was pressure, paranoia, and something darker. Everyone knew he drank on set, even if no one dared admit it out loud. That travel mug he carried around, it wasn't filled with coffee. "The whiskey smell was strong enough to knock you back," said one lighting tech. You didn't even have to stand close to know. During those emotional, tear-filled scenes that made America cry, his trembling hands weren't acting, they were real. His emotions were true, Michael Jr. later said softly, but not for the scene, for his own pain. By then, Landon's double life had become an open secret on set one nobody dared to confront. He directed, wrote, and starred in the show, so the whole machine moved according to his moods. One day he'd laugh, pull everyone in for a group photo, and charm the crew with stories from Bonanza. The next, he'd snap over something tiny, a line, a prop, or even the way someone looked at him. I watched him tear into a day player once, said Reynolds. She had only 2 lines. He barked at her. You act like you've never lost anyone in your life. She froze. Everyone did. The real breaking point came when Cindy Clarico, the young woman who'd once been his makeup artist, joined the production as his personal assistant and was by his side constantly. She was just 18 when she started, quiet and polite, but her presence changed everything. He believed she understood him better than anyone, said one crew member. But the favoritism made the air heavy. Soon, Cindy had authority no one else did. She could adjust the women's costumes if she wanted. Melissa Gilbert later wrote in her memoir, "No one stopped her. Michael treated her like a second director. That dynamic didn't sit well with everyone. Senior actresses started keeping their distance, whispering that he'd become unpredictable. One admitted flatly, 'You can't work with a man who's both tipsy and jealous.' If anyone on set talked to Cindy for too long, Landon would notice. The mood would shift. He'd cut the take, shout at the crew, and redo the entire scene himself," a sound operator remembered. He looked at people with eyes that couldn't control their own anger. Reynolds agreed. We didn't know if it was jealousy or the drink, probably both. And so, The Little House on the Prairie set the same place that millions of viewers saw as pure, wholesome, and filled with love, became something else entirely. That set wasn't warm, Reynolds said. It was cold. Fear ran everything. When Landon entered, the air itself seemed to freeze. We filmed like soldiers crossing a battlefield, said a sound technician. If he frowned, the whole stage held its breath. Sometimes, Michael Jr. was allowed by his mother to visit. He remembered walking onto the set for the first time, excited, nervous, just wanting to see his dad in action. He was calling the shots, Michael said. His voice was sharp, commanding. Everyone called him Pa. He looked around, confused. Everyone was afraid of his father, yet they still called him that nickname, Pa, the symbol of love and guidance that defined the show. When the day ended, I ran up to him, Michael Jr. recalled, eyes welling up. "Dad," I shouted, but he only glanced over, gave a small nod, like I was a stranger, like I was just another fan, and then he turned away. I stood there, Michael said softly, surrounded by people who called him Pa, while I was the only one who didn't get to say Dad. By the late 1970 seconds, Michael Landon had become a ticking time bomb, one spark away from exploding. Crew members remembered him sitting in his car for hours, refusing to step foot on set. And when he finally did, it was often with a half-empty bottle in hand. Once, during a sunset scene, one gaffer recalled, the clouds shifted and the light changed slightly. He grabbed a reflector and smashed it to pieces, shouting, "I won't shoot under a fake sky." Then he stormed off, leaving everyone frozen in place. In NBC meetings, he was just as unpredictable. One moment smooth and charming, the next slamming his fist on the table and demanding full creative control. Michael was brilliant, one producer admitted, but he was self-destructive. He wanted to control everything, the light, the dialogue, even people's emotions. The constant tension started driving loyal people away. One of Little House on the Prairie's longest-tenured writers confided in his private journal, "We don't recognize him anymore. Maybe the spotlight burned his true self to ash." For Michael Landon Jr., those years were complicated, a mix of pride and fear. "I saw 2 men," he said. "The one on screen, gentle, wise, teaching faith, and the one off camera, holding a glass, eyes empty." He remembered one night in particular. His father leaned back in his chair, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "If you want to make movies, learn to lie. In this business, the honest ones are the first to fall." "I never forgot that," Michael Jr. admitted. "That's when I realized my father wasn't creating anymore. He was surviving by pretending." By 1983, when Little House on the Prairie ended, the entire cast and crew seemed to breathe for the first time in years. "We loved him," Melissa Gilbert said later, "but we feared him too. Every time he smiled on camera, I'd ask myself, is it real?" For Michael Jr., the final day of filming was the hardest. He sat quietly in the bleachers, watching his father shoot his last scene hugging a daughter under the golden light of dusk. The crew applauded, touched by the warmth of the moment. "My eyes stung," Michael Jr. remembered, "because that gentle father only existed on screen. The real man had been gone for a long time. When the stage lights went dark, all that remained was silence, the hollow space between fame and loneliness. That's the gap my father never escaped," he said softly. Then Michael's tone changed lower, slower, heavier. "People think my father died of illness," he said, "but really, he died of something sweeter and more dangerous than smoke and drink." He paused. Power. As he spoke, it felt less like a story and more like a confession. "When my father started moving among public figures, he thought he was doing something grand," Michael said. "But no one knew the light he chased was the same flame that burned him." After Highway to Heaven became a runaway success, Michael Landon wasn't just a TV icon, he was the face of American virtue. His words about faith and family were quoted in newspapers, his image printed in Life magazine beside an American flag, arm raised like a preacher of purity. But behind that clean image, something else was happening, something sharper than any script he ever wrote. In 1987, Landon began appearing at lavish California fundraisers at the Beverly Hills Hotel, shoulder to shoulder with political power players, millionaires, and donors. The Los Angeles Times even called him Michael Landon, standard bearer for family values. But, according to a former personal aide, Richard Halper, that wasn't the full picture. Landon didn't go to those events just to speak, Halper revealed. He went to make deals. He described quiet handshakes happening in the corners, the kind that weren't about art or inspiration. "They weren't trading scripts," Halper said. "They were trading money." And just like that, the man America believed was building stories of hope had started living inside one of his own. Only this time, the story was darker, more dangerous, and absolutely real. It wasn't just fame anymore, it was money. A lot of it. Behind closed doors in Los Angeles and Washington, powerful financiers saw Michael Landon as the perfect bridge between Hollywood's glow and the political world's ambition. "They needed someone clean to make the flow look legitimate," recalled former aide Richard Halper. And Michael was perfect moral on the outside, confident, always talking about family and faith. He used that image to pitch educational projects centered on national values, community, and faith-based storytelling. But according to several insiders, those projects weren't just about messages, they were about money movement. Halper claimed that many of the pledges came from companies already rumored to be under federal scrutiny for shifting funds through small, independent film markets. A weekly report from 1990 even hinted that Landon had accepted large, unclear contributions worth millions. He never responded publicly. Instead, he kept showing up smiling at charity galas, shaking hands at Capitol events, and standing beside familiar faces in Washington. He looked unstoppable, almost untouchable. "My father once told me, 'No one in public life is spotless, only the hiding differs,'" Michael Jr. recalled. "When I heard that, I knew he wasn't a filmmaker anymore. He'd become a brand." As Landon waded deeper into the world of influence, he started to feel like a stranger even to himself. Gone was the sensitive artist who once cried during scripts. In his place stood a polished speaker, rehearsed, calculated, robotic. Every word seemed written by someone else. "Family is this country's foundation," he'd declare. "Faith is the compass. A father must be the pillar." The speeches sounded inspiring to the public, but to anyone who knew him privately, those words rang hollow. They were the emptiest lines he ever spoke, Michael Jr. said sadly. In 1989, Michael Jr. joined his father for a trip to the Capitol. He watched from across a grand banquet hall as Landon sat at a long table with senators, donors, and business leaders. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed, but there was something cold in the air. Everyone smiled, Michael said, but no one met each other's eyes. He watched his father laugh along that familiar grin, but emptier somehow. He looked like he'd forgotten who he was smiling at, Michael Jr. remembered. Like even he didn't believe his own act anymore. Later that night, Michael overheard a quiet phone call coming from the hotel suite. His father's tone was low, almost casual, but the words chilled him. "Let them think I'm doing it for family," Landon murmured. "As long as the transfers land in the right place." That single sentence haunted Michael Jr. for decades. "I thought he was just an artist," he admitted years later in a 2025 retrospective interview. Turns out he knew how to bargain with the glow and how to sell it. By the end of the 1,980 seconds, Landon's confidence had transformed into something else entirely, a kind of untouchable arrogance. He believed he could rise above it all, Hollywood, politics, even public opinion. He began hinting at a possible run for the California State Chamber and started planning a youth film foundation backed by energy sector donors. It sounded noble, the kind of dream project that would cement his image forever. But to those who knew the truth, it was one more mask in a long line of performances. And behind that mask, a man who no longer knew where the acting stopped and the real Michael Landon began. But soon, the old whispers returned: the drinking, the private meetings, the strange late-night gatherings at his Malibu home. A few reporters began quietly collecting notes, following the trail of quiet visitors and hidden phone calls. The more Michael Landon tried to prove he was pure, the more people began to doubt him. Michael Jr. put it bluntly. He didn't understand that in this town, people forgive the fallen and even the unfaithful. But they'll never forgive the ones who pretend to be saints. Then came 1991, the year everything changed. The news broke like a thunderclap. Michael Landon was seriously ill. Headlines called it the tragedy of a national hero. But behind Hollywood's polished sympathy, there were murmurs, cold ones. "That's payback," a former producer told a glossy magazine. "He spent his life talking about light, but lived in shadows. This ending was inevitable." As his health declined, Landon still appeared on TV, his smile unchanged, his voice calm, his tone steady. He spoke about faith and family as if reciting a script he no longer believed in. "I watched his last interview," Michael Jr. recalled. Silver hair, a trembling smile, but his eyes, they were empty. He was acting in his final frame. When the day came and Michael Landon passed away, the world stopped to mourn. Thousands cried, flowers flooded his star on the Walk of Fame, and the media called him the father America grew up with. But for his son, there were no tears. "I didn't cry," Michael Jr. said quietly. "I just looked at his portrait, stern eyes, slicked hair, and thought, finally, he's at peace, because only in death did he no longer have to perform." And just like that, the legend of Michael Landon closed not with applause, but with a hush, a cold silence between two worlds, one where the public still worships an image, and another where the truth lies buried beside the man himself. He once said something that still echoes decades later: "The worst thing isn't being forgotten, it's being remembered wrong." Now, people still remember him, but no one's sure who they're remembering anymore. Are they mourning a model father? Or bowing to a legend made of smoke and illusion? As for Michael Landon Jr., after 4 decades living in his father's shadow, he finally spoke his truth. In his last interview, he said softly, "My father wanted to be loved, but he never learned how to love anyone for real." Maybe that's the true tragedy. They laid him to rest among the stars, the literal stars of the screen. But even that sky, bright and eternal, seems to grow colder each year as the truth keeps surfacing. The myth fades, the glow dims, And what's left behind is something deeper, the ache of a man who spent his whole life acting until he couldn't anymore. If this story gave you chills, made you pause, or made you question the glossy glow of Hollywood, don't leave just yet. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe because there are still untold truths behind the legends we thought we knew. Because sometimes the scariest thing in show business isn't the scandal, it's the role that never ends.